Now, if you're that job seeker or somebody who's jumped out and you're wanting to better yourself or better where you were, right now's the time. Be trainable, be on time, have a good attitude, and a lot of people will take you on and train you. If you didn't say, well, I didn't have the skills, but guess what?
You're with The Capitalist Sage, a twice-a-month podcast that seeks out entrepreneurs and experts that speak to the real-world life of doing business for their sage advice. Now, with your hosts, Karl Barham and Rico Figliolini.
Welcome to the Capitalist Sage podcast. We're here to bring you advice and tips from seasoned pros and experts to help you improve your business. I'm Karl Barham with Transworld Business Advisors, and my co-host is Rico Figliolini with Mighty Rockets Digital Marketing and the publisher of the Petrie Corner magazine. How you doing today, Rico?
Great, thank you. Great to be here. There's going to be a good show, so I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Why don't we start off by introducing our sponsor for today?
Sure. This episode of The Capitalist Sage is being sponsored by Petrie Corners magazine, which also sponsors a family of podcasts, including Petrie Corners Life. And you should check out also Prime Lunchtime with the City Manager. So all good stuff, and great to have these opportunities to do these shows.
Well, today it is my pleasure to introduce our guest, Commissioner Mark Butler. He is the Georgia Commissioner of Labor. The Department of Labor's mission is to work with both public and private partners in building the workforce system that contributes to Georgia's economic prosperity. Today, we'd like to talk a little bit about what's happening in the labor market here in Georgia, some of the trends that we see going forward, and most importantly, what are some of the resources that are available for small and large business owners in finding great talent to help their businesses and organizations prosper? How are you doing today, Commissioner Butler?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on. And I like the pressure you're putting on me saying it's going to be a great show. We hope so. We try to make this interesting. A lot of times people hear that the labor commissioner is going to come speak and they're like, oh gosh, that doesn't sound very exciting. But I think workforce development is very exciting. And I think what we're seeing right now in our economy it's exciting, but it's also scary at the same time. We're seeing things that are happening right now in our economy that quite frankly just don't make sense. There is just very strange things going on right now. And you really can't depend on some of the old indicators to really tell you what's going on in the economy because they just really are not relevant right now.
I know a lot of small business owners especially feel alone out there. When I talk to business owners every day, they're all looking for people. They're cutting back hours, reducing services, and they're starting to do that. Maybe you could share with us a little bit about the Department of Labor's role in the Georgia infrastructure when it comes to workforce development.
Right. Well, right now, the department has been in a kind of a mode of transition because, until about 6 or 7 months ago, we were tasked by the federal government to roll out a bunch of new unemployment programs because of the pandemic. And so we basically had to go all hands on deck approach and shifted a lot of our personnel that used to work in employment services and business services. They had to come over to the unemployment side of the house because it was almost impossible to hire during the pandemic and add new people. So we had to use our own people that were doing different jobs. And so we're in a transition right now, putting those people back to work because one thing that we're seeing right now, even though we're seeing jobs come back fairly quickly and also seeing employment right now, I think employment is within about 20,000 jobs statewide of being back to where it was before the pandemic. However, the number of individuals in the workforce is down greater than that. Now, I throw a lot of terms out there and I want to, say something for the people that are listening. Workforce, when you hear me say workforce, that's everybody who is working or actively seeking work. Okay. You may not be working, but you're wanting to work. And then you have employment. Obviously, that's self-explanatory. Those folks are actually working. And when I talk about jobs, I'm not necessarily talking about people working. I'm talking about total number of jobs. These could be also open jobs that haven't been filled. And that's really where the big emphasis is right now, as everybody who's listening to this, probably knows. And almost anybody that I've ever talked to that's been around for, more than say 40 years can tell you that they've never seen anything quite like this. I've talked to veterans who've been here almost 30 years, and they said they've never seen the amount of job openings that we have right now that are going unfilled. And there's a lot of things that have contributed to that. One of the things that we were saying, probably 6 or 8 months ago that was going to be a factor, and now we're starting to see some studies come out to say this is a factor. A lot of individuals who are either right at retirement or at retirement, or maybe have been working past retirement age, have decided to leave the workforce. The pandemic has shifted the way somebody thinks about life and what they're doing. It's changed their priorities. And that baby boom generation that we've been kind of wondering what's going to happen, when all these baby boomers retire, because that's a big chunk of our workforce. What's going to happen? You're finding out right now what's going to happen. And what's happening is we have a ton of jobs sitting out there that need to be filled. And you'll hear a lot of these reports come out from economists saying, job growth is slow. Job growth right now is not where you've got to be looking. Right now, you've got to be looking at getting more people in the workforce and filling those jobs. Because, if you're like me and you came from the private sector, you may want to hire 100 people right now, but if you can only manage 10, that's the only jobs you're filling. So you can't even get to the other 90 yet. And so one of the things, you're not going to see tremendous job growth until we can start filling the ones that we have. You can't create more until you fill the ones you have. But right now it's a real struggle just because you don't have the number of individuals who are out there looking. Matter of fact, we have actually fewer people unemployed right now than we had before the pandemic began. So a lot more people are working. We just broke our all-time for unemployment rate this past month down to 3.2%, which that's extraordinarily low, especially for a state our size and a population as big as what we have. And there's a very good chance we're probably going to end up breaking that record yet again because the job market and the labor pool is just getting tighter and tighter.
So if I could ask, if I understand correctly, the number of people available, and I'll say probably across the country, but say here in Georgia, that are available to fill jobs has decreased. And some of it is baby boomers retiring. Some of these people are making personal choices to not work because of childcare or whatever related issues. But we have a smaller pool of people to fill the job. The number of jobs have stayed at least relatively stable or they're there. But right now, the challenge for employers is finding those people and matching them to the jobs that fit their skills.
Right. If you take a look, the best estimates that the U.S. Department of Labor, when they do their surveys, the best estimates they have for Georgia anyway, we're showing that right now we have probably about 40,000 fewer people in our workforce than we had, say, right before the pandemic started. So, February 2020. Now, I know that seems like forever ago, but go back and think about February 2020. We had already just set a new all-time low unemployment record back then, which we've already broken now. And we already had a very tight labor market then. Now, subtract 40,000 people out of that same pool. Even in a state our size, that is a tremendous. And by the way, I think 40,000 is a low number. I think they're missing it. I think that when they go back and look at these numbers, I think that number is going to be far greater than that. Otherwise, you wouldn't see the issues we're having because we weren't having this kind of issues. Think about all the restaurants right now that are not able to open their dining rooms and they can only handle carry out and things like that. And then actually that kind of rolls over to all kind of small business. It doesn't matter what you're doing. And that has been contributing to our supply chain problems, which is also going to be contributing to inflation. Because right now, one of the side effects, which is good and bad, depending on what side of this equation you're on, and I say it's kind of a wash, because there is, such a tight labor pool, the first thing everybody thinks of is, okay, well, I got to raise my wages. If I raise up my pay scale, then I'll get those workers, right? And so they do that. Well, everybody else is having that same thought. And so they're raising theirs up too. And so then what you have is, okay, now we've got to pay for these auto pay raises because I'm not just paying that new worker more, but everybody who's been here a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, I've got to push them up too because that won't be fair. So then if you've ever run a business, 70 to 80% of your cost is going to be personnel in most cases. So now you got, okay, I got to pay for this. So what do? You push up the price of goods, you push up the price of service. We just had a report came out, this morning where it showed that we just, set a monthly record for increased inflation. I think it hit 6% this past month. That's just crazy. But if you've been, if you're like me, I do the grocery shopping. And I can go ahead and tell you, I have a very good memory for prices because I'm a bargain shopper. I like to get the best deal. And I had my daughter with me the other day. She was visiting from New York and she went to the grocery store with me. I said, you see that pack of bacon right there? I said, I can remember about a year and a half ago, that pack of bacon was $6. And here it is, $11.99, $12 basically. That's twice as much as I was getting for it. Now I'm thinking, we're not buying that pack. I just can't see myself giving that kind of money for bacon, but I probably will. But think about that. So let's say you're one of those individuals that got lucky and all of a sudden you were maybe in a $9.50 or $10 an hour job and now you're making $15 an hour job, but your grocery bill has gone up 40%. Okay. So you didn't actually get a raise, did you? All your costs for childcare, for gas, look at gas. Gas is up a lot from where it was this time a year ago. You got to get to work. And so all your costs have increased across the board. And so a lot of this stuff is going to be a wash. And so right now we're in that adjustment period. We've got to get used to the new cost of things. And people say, well, this is only transitory. This is going to go, but no, it's not. Because what's driving inflation right now, a lot of it is salaries. You think in 8 months from now, all of a sudden 40,000 people are going to appear in the workforce? I'm telling you, they're not. If you look at trends historically, how they come back, they're just not. And so you can't go back and reset all those salaries. Those salaries and those hourly wages are here. And so these prices are going to be here. And so, as a small business, you've got to adjust to the new normal. And I hate to use that term more than anything, but this is a new normal. These costs that you're experiencing are not temporary. I mean, I do believe, I don't have a doctorate, a PhD in economics, but I do have a lot, and I mean a lot of practical experience in working in the economy. And I'm telling you, these costs are here.
Rico and I were just talking about that. We were talking about looking at some of the studies and so on the impact. So if it's a fact that these costs are here, and that number you gave, 40,000 less people in a state the size of Georgia, less people out there, and as these businesses now need more workers, can you give some insight on what are the strategies you're seeing the better businesses, the smarter businesses doing to help close that gap?
Well, really right now, I think everybody's trying to find their way, because the old way of doing things is not here anymore. Like a lot of people, we still get a lot of calls from different parts of the state wanting us to do in-person job fairs. And I go ahead and tell you, we've seen very, very mixed results for that type of activity. Most job seekers we're talking to, they're really leaning on online searches, social media searches for jobs. We're not seeing a whole lot of them wanting to show up for in-person. We're trying to tell people to get away from that and really concentrate on your online efforts. But also, take the temperature of what's around you. Like we talked to a food producer, and I won't tell exactly who this is because they probably know who I'm talking about, but we talked to a company that produces a food product that a lot of restaurants use. And they were complaining about not finding workers. And so we told them, well, let's get together and let's talk about your strategy. And they were telling us what their hourly wages were. And when they told us what their hourly wages were, we were saying, you do realize that the people who are cooking this product and the restaurants you're selling to are making more than the people that are producing it in your factory. And your job is much harder than the one in the restaurant, I can promise you, because it was a live animal type product. And so that's hard. That's tough work. And so I'm like, you're going to have a hard time hiring somebody if you're paying less than what the restaurant is paying this person that's cooking it, because this is a lot more grueling work. And, they're like, well, we just can't do that. I'm like, if you can't do that, then you have to do what a lot of companies are doing. And you're seeing a lot more investment in automation, which will end up cutting your total number of jobs down the road, but it will also create a new level of jobs for people who've got to maintain that automation, which are higher paying jobs. So I think right now, one of the things that is exciting is there are events that happen throughout history that cause civilizations to push things dramatically forward technology-wise every so often. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's tragic events like what we've just experienced with COVID, with a lot of death. I think life as we know it is going to be just so dramatically different in the years forward. Some of us who've been around for a little while used to be in a lot of stuff in person. A lot of that has changed. And so business models are going to have to change, and a lot of that storefront stuff is going to have to change. I mean, if you would have told me 2 years ago that every grocery store that I go to is deliver food, and almost every restaurant that I could ever want to I can get food delivered, I'd say you're crazy. There's no way that'll work. Guess what?
Yep.
It's totally different.
Let me ask you this too. It's lack of bodies out there, if you will, but is some of it also lack of certain types of education? For example, instead of having a 4-year degree, there are a lot of kids that are realizing, I don't want this debt. I don't want 4 years of debt for a job that may not pay me as much as I want, or it's a job that they're realizing through the pandemic, it's a job they really don't want to do with their life. They don't want to spend that. I think people are coming to a realization, coming to Jesus, if you will, about what their life means and what they want to do with their life. Is it better to do a 2-year degree? Is the HVAC industry needing people? I mean, I've seen sign-in bonuses in that industry, and there's not enough people certified to do that work to get there. So is some of it that? And can the state help there, or have they?
Well, when you talk about a lack of people, especially if it's for whatever reason, yes, because then, typically a lot of the pool that's sitting out there right now that's looking for work, based on some of the numbers we've seen internally, are folks whose education requirements are probably not up to a lot of the levels that they need to be for some of the jobs that are out there. And so there's a lot of opportunity to extend, some new training to some individuals if they'll take advantage of it. And there is a lot of money out there and there's a lot of availability of training. But one of the exciting things that I think you're going to see is because of this talent crunch that we've got right now, I think you're going to push forward some thinking that nobody, really wanted to touch for a while, and that is alternative forms of training. I think that you're going to see a lot more short-term training programs. You're going to see a lot of industries go, you know what? We've always required a 4-year degree, and I'm not knocking 4-year degrees. I've got one. I paid a lot of money for my daughter to have one. And so right now it's kind of a necessity because you've got to have the people to get the work done or you're going to go out of business yourself. And so I think you're going to see a lot of specialized training that companies are going to start sponsoring themselves, especially like big tech companies with programming, because they're like, you know what? If you've got the aptitude and we can tell that you're trainable, we can bring you in here and we can teach you this coding and we can get you ready to go. And so it's almost like everything that is old is new again.
Yep.
We were having this conversation around the table the other day here at the office. A lot of the incentives that we're seeing, a lot of companies bring back, like a lot of companies are saying, we're going to start catering lunch every day. I can remember growing up and there was a bank that my dad worked at and they had lunch every day. Now that wasn't free, but it was like stupid cheap, like $1.25. It was nothing. And it was a hearty plate of food and it was cooked very well. So we're hearing a lot of companies bringing things like that and all kind of, different type of stuff they used to do a long time ago. They're bringing that back. But back then also a lot of companies, they would grab people out of high school and they would train them, do on-the-job training and teach them how to do it. And a lot of those always doing things through, apprenticeships, stuff like that are going to get extremely hot right now. And they're going to have to, because let's be honest, if you got this big glut of talent, can you wait 4 years for a graduate?
Right.
4 years is a long time in the business world. They need people now. And I guarantee you, you're going to start also seeing companies recruit, and something to watch for. Watch these stats and mark my words and see if I'm right. Companies are going to start recruiting in the technical colleges, in the universities, not for graduates, but for people that they can grab out of there early before they even graduate and put them in jobs. And graduation rates, I think, will suffer. Yeah. However, these folks are going to end up going in some pretty good jobs. But you watch, I'm telling you, that's going to happen, especially in a lot of the trades, because they can go get a certification somewhere else and not necessarily get that over here.
And I'm seeing my kids are like college age level and have an 18-year-old ready to go. And I'm seeing, I can't tell you, almost feels like a political campaign. I'm seeing so many mailers from so many small colleges. We're not talking about big ones, although we did get UGA and I think Georgia Tech. But a lot of small colleges in Georgia are mailing. And because I got a feeling that they're not getting enough recruits. And small colleges are going to get hit with this. So there's another problem right there.
There's been a long trending issue before the pandemic in this labor issue where hiring managers, everybody, when you looked at the job description, wanted somebody with 3 to 5 years experience doing the job. They wanted XYZ degrees doing the job. And they would always, when there was abundance of applicants to fill that became a de facto filter. And it's too easy to filter, degree or no degree. One is out, one is in, keep going in the process. I think what's happening now, it's going to force employers, business owners to think differently about who they hire, transferable skills, and it'll put more emphasis on the ability to train somebody up. So big companies did that all the time. I remember a while ago, I worked for General Motors, and they had a humongous training program. You could come in at any position in the company. It could be hourly, it could be engineer, it could be finance, and you go through a program and they train you on it and progress you throughout your career. Well, they had the resources to do it, but I think they also had a need for talent and they had to build their own. Small business owners don't have that leverage. Are there things out there where people can work in collaboration to adjust their hiring practices, figure out which ones need degrees? If it's a lawyer, I assume you should have a law degree. But there are other roles that you may not need as much formal education, but it puts the onus on the employer to train people, take people with the right stuff and teach them how to do the job in the factory or on the floor, waiting services, etc.
Well, I think when you approach the prospect of somebody coming in, I think showing them that you're going to be there for them with a career path. I think that's really important. A lot of people don't talk about that enough. It's not enough just to get that entry level worker, but a lot of times say, hey, look, you may come in here and you may start here, but what we want to do is we're going to train you, we're going to provide training for you here, and we're going to mentor you, and then one day you can kind of move up. Those types of things. I mean, of course, now when you talk about small businesses, my definition of small business is anything from one person to 500. And so when you start getting into some of those larger ones, obviously they're going to have a little bit more resources, and also because of the volume that they're hiring. I tell people, like, if you're not getting a certain type of training, you're not seeing it, go visit your local technical college. Let them know what it is you're looking for. They may have some programs that they can tweak or modify. Or I can tell you one of the big trends that they're really dipping their toe in right now is doing a lot of short, or I say not short term, but not that 2-year degree, but they're doing a lot more certificate programs that are a lot shorter training. And so, like, if you've got a certain demand, and let's say, for example, that this is one thing where you got to do some cooperation. If you got some competitors out there who have some very similar needs, you really need to come together on this and go to the technical college and go, hey, if you would do some short-term training for X, Y, and Z, it could really help 4 or 5 companies out for this type of stuff. And so I think, we're really going to have to do a lot more short-term type training because of these immediate needs. I don't think you can wait years down the road. I think a lot of things are going to suffer. However, Georgia is actually set up for this type of situation better than other states. And that's why I think you're going to see us win a lot of recruiting battles for companies that are looking to locate, because we have the Quick Start system, which specializes exactly in that very specific training for a specific type of industry. And so once you start attracting a couple of companies that do a certain thing, then that one particular school, what they're basically doing is pumping out graduates. And I say graduates, not necessarily with a degree, but a certificate or type of training that fits in there. And I think we're well suited. There's some things in there, but small businesses, talk about their little mom and pops, 6, 10, 12, especially if you're doing some complicated type things. Unfortunately, some of the onus is going to be on yourself. However, keep in mind, there are smaller colleges and universities that do have continuing ed programs. You could approach them to see what they've got, especially if you're talking about things like bookkeeping or different things like that. But there are actually a lot of opportunities out there for training that can work with even smaller businesses, especially with your technical colleges, that a lot of people don't know about. And so I'd really strongly suggest, if you're having certain types of needs, go talk to your local technical college. And they have specialists that can sit down and talk with you, see what kind of training they provide. And they can also provide you with a pipeline for talent for people who are coming into the technical college too. It's great recruiting grounds. We use them.
I think you mentioned something there, and there might be a role for the local business groups, including chambers of commerce, to serve as a focal point for groups of businesses. So if there's a need around restaurants, approaching the technical colleges as a group around what specific skills and as a talent pipeline. I know it doesn't happen naturally and everyone's got a lot on their plate, but I think the need is starting to increase enough where the pressure will be, we need to find more innovative ways to fill that talent gap.
You actually, when you mentioned that about the restaurants and you're talking about technical colleges, a lot of people don't know this, but a lot of technical colleges have very good culinary programs. I know this because I've eaten a lot of the food that they've done in some of these places, and they do a great job. And so a lot of the restaurants, they don't know that in some cases, and because we've talked to some restaurants and say, hey, if you talk to technical college, they have a culinary program. You see, you can't find this and find that. Right down the road, they're training them right here. So making those connections a lot of times makes a big difference.
Absolutely. I want to reintroduce Mark Butler, the Georgia Commissioner of Labor, and start to talk a little bit about some of the resources. I explored your website and looked at some of the resources that are available for people looking for jobs and for employers. Can you talk a little bit about the resources available for job seekers and people looking to fill positions?
Well, probably the biggest resource we have is our Employ Georgia website. It's a job board. It works for both the employer and the job seeker. If you post your jobs on there, you can push out your job listing to job seekers. And if they're interested, they can hit you back and you can kind of start your recruitment at that point. So make sure you're using that. It's a free service. It also provides us with a lot of very good data. We also, for certain types of recruitments, we have business service recruiters around the state that actually work with a lot of companies to do very specific recruitments. We have a lot of those going on right now. And quite frankly, that resource is probably stretched extraordinarily thin right now. And of course, we're hiring too here at the Department of Labor. Of course, it's harder. Imagine, as the private sector is hard to compete for this, folks out there. It's much harder for the state to do it. But so we have a lot of recruitings and things like that going on too. But we don't do just that. There's a lot of other resources on our website if you'll just take a look. For example, if you don't have an employee handbook, I strongly suggest you have one. We have basically a boilerplate language one that's sitting on there that you can download and that you can make changes to it to fit your business. Make sure you have one of those hiring. It's a different world out there. But the main thing is on the recruiting. Take a look at the recruiting section on our website, especially with Employ Georgia. That's where most people are actually looking right now. It's one of the hot places where people are looking for jobs. Use it. It's free.
That is a great resource that's available, and people may not realize that it's free. There's so many people out there that there are paid services for that, but there are some free services like that. And I want to highlight the handbook that you mentioned really quickly. Now is the time, if you think about it, when you're in a crunch, when labor markets are tight, to reinvest in your system, your employment system, which includes handbook. A lot of business owners don't take the time to develop handbook because they don't know how, they don't think that they need it. But when they run into challenges and trouble, some of the things that are in employee handbook can help them there. They may not realize there is another resource out there available. You could download one, you try to complete one yourself, or even engaging in professionals to help you fine-tune the handbook to your particular industry and or business. But those are great resources that are available. What do you see happening in 2022? Now as people are making plans, and I'll break it out the service sector and others, what should business owners be factoring in as they're making their business plans for 2022?
Well, I hate to say it this way, but you could probably expect more of the same because we actually ran some numbers and looked at some past trends coming out of recessions, which obviously this is different than a recession. And what we have seen in the past, when we've had a very large drop, like we're just seeing right now in the workforce, typically those workers don't come back very quickly. It takes years to recover. Don't think, I'm not trying to rain on anybody's parade, but don't think that those 40,000 people are going to magically appear in 6 to 8 months. It's just not going to happen. Historically, it doesn't happen. The only way it happens if a whole bunch of people leave some other state because there's no opportunity to come here. And that's not going to happen because other states are having the same problem we are. Because, it wasn't just in Georgia that we saw a lot of people leave the workforce. It's the entire nation. So you need to be making plans now. You need to adjust now for the fact that this is not going to end anytime soon. And also start thinking about where's that supply and demand cross for you when it comes to how much you can afford to pay versus how much you can afford to charge. So you really need to spend some time rolling that over and thinking through that because we're a long way off from this kind of getting settled in. Take a look at how you're doing business. Think of different ways of doing what you're doing, possibly with less people. You're going to have to readjust because if it wasn't for the virus, I think we would have had years to make this adjustment. But I think that because we did have the pandemic, I do believe with all my heart that it pushed forward a lot of retirements that weren't going to happen for years from now. And it's very hard to replace that talent in the stream, so to say. And so it's going to be tough going. And look, trust me, one of the things that keeps me up, and I'll give you an example, one of the things that keeps me up at nights here is, if anybody knows anything about state government is older, as they say. I put air quotes for those that are just listening, and which means, our average age in state government is about 54, and I'm right there at that average myself. Right now in my agency of about, 1,100 people, about 25% of my entire agency can walk out the door today with full retirement. Do some quick math, and let's just say only 200 of those people leave before the end of the year. Imagine that. If you had 1,000 people that work for you, you had to find 200 people to replace them in the next 2 months. So our crunch is coming here too. And so we can relate and we know how tough this is. And you got to constantly recruit, never stop recruiting. It's almost like now when you go out, not only as a small business person, you're trying to sell what you're trying to sell, but you're also trying to recruit workers in the same breath. Like, well, okay, you don't want to buy it? Oh, hey, would you want to come work for me?
I think you're hitting on a really insightful point there. People look at their marketing budget around marketing their products and goods and services. But recruiting, if it's important for your business, especially service-based business, developing a recruiting strategy, an onboarding strategy to attract people should be factored in to your budget in 2022. If you don't, you will be spending the money to do it one way or the other. So you might as well start factoring it into your budgets.
Well, think about it. Almost everything you're getting right now, let's say you get like a solicitation in the mail. One side it says buy our roofing system. On the other side it says hiring roofers. Like when you go out to eat, a lot of times on the receipt it says now hiring, whatever. I mean, it's everywhere. And I've never seen anything like it. Here's the good news. So we got a lot of bad news there. But now if you're that job seeker or somebody who's jumped out and you're wanting to better yourself or better where you were, right now is the time. Be trainable, be on time, have a good attitude, and a lot of people will take you on and train you. If you didn't say, well, I didn't have the skills, but guess what? Here's your workaround right now. Take advantage of this.
We had one of our guests was Music Matters Productions, and it was Lindsay was the marketing person. But the one constant thing they said was just be on time.
Mhm.
Literally, that was the mantra. 4 or 5 times through the conversation, we just someone to be on time, to be there, I guess, to show up. Isn't that the problem? I mean, I'll do a drive-thru at Dunkin' Donuts where the front door is locked because they don't have enough people to man a small store. And
Right.
the line is wrapped around, and all they need is someone that can hit the register. I mean, it's pretty easy at the point of purchase sales, and they still can't find the right people. And Salata has a permanent sign essentially on their window saying $15 an hour, we're looking to hire. When you get that happening, it's just sad.
Everyone is going through that and realizing that. I'll offer one other insight that people may not think about. Your key employees, those people that really rely on, this isn't the time to neglect them.
That's right.
Figuring out ways, if you haven't talked to that employee that's been with you for 10 years and has done an outstanding job and knows your systems and your customers love them, it's the holiday season. It's time to give them love. It's time to take care of them and start, compensating them, coming up with ways to retain those key employees, because this isn't the time to want to go out to find that new person. Now that you have to train them, you got to pay them more, and they may not know all the things that help you be successful over the years. So I vote for taking care of those key employees this year.
Yeah, you've got to do that. That's part of the strategy, because it's much cheaper to keep one than to hire one. It's simple math right there. Yeah, of course, my problem is the state government. We can't give out bonuses, so that's not allowable. So trust me, there's been a few times here lately for just myself, I'm thinking, man, I remember that job, my private sector job I had before I became labor commissioner. I remember those Christmas bonuses I used to get, and it paid for Christmas. And I'm like, I don't get Christmas bonuses anymore. I got to have a Christmas account now.
It's a challenge, and not only economically compensating, but sometimes it's just flexibility, as some people have shifted where they may, instead of going in 5 days a week, they can work 4 days in the office, 1 day at home. There are different ways to recognize those great employees in ways that could drive retention. We had one instance of an employer we know of that just allow one of their key employees to have 2 days from home. They can do some other things. It makes commute a little bit less. And for that person, that probably prevented them from looking for another job. And they're able to retain that person. There's different challenges when you're managing people remotely, but this past 18 months plus has taught us a lot on how to get creative in engaging people remotely when necessary.
Yeah, but if you're in the service industry, or if you're in manufacturing, work from home really doesn't work real well. And those challenges are going to be totally different. You're going to see a lot of new ideas. I know there's a lot of people rethinking things like childcare and education bonuses and things like that right there. So it's definitely a competitive market. When you have competitiveness and this kind of thing, hunt for talent, you're going to probably see a lot of different things. It's a good time if you're out there trying to improve where you're at, because the opportunities are out there, and some of the benefits I've seen put out there are different and really interesting.
Absolutely. And I would say to employers, take a look at your job description and make it more open. So for people that are great workers, great attitudes, have the right stuff, they may not have the experience exactly that fits your need, or they may not have all the degrees that they would want. But figuring out which jobs need what types of criteria and open up that lens, you'll find a lot of great people out there that can do great for your companies. Commissioner Butler, I would like to thank you so much for joining us and just sharing some of the information and data that you're collecting and what you're seeing there in the market. It's really apparent that Georgia is a place where employers want to be. There's this collaboration between government and private sector that helps create the tools and the vehicles for success here. And I want to thank you for your leadership in that, and continue to be a resource to the community to help business owners and people looking for jobs. I'd like to also thank Rico for everything that he does to continue to drive the Capitalist Sage, as well as the other family of podcasts here. I'm Carl Barham with Transworld Business Advisors of Atlanta Peachtree. our business, we work with small business owners, helping them with how to improve their business, grow their business, and when they're ready, exit their business. You can contact and schedule a consultation with any one of our business advisors. And yes, we are one of the many companies that are also looking for people that want to do something different with their life. And we do have a training program to help bring people on that want to help be business advisors for small businesses. You can reach us at our website at www.tworld.com/Atlanta Peachtree. We help people with finding businesses to buy, selling businesses, and consulting people on how to franchise their business when they're ready. Rico, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you've got going on?
Sure. We're working on the next issue of Peachtree Corners Magazine, the December-January issue. It's going to be packed with a lot of things. We're mainly talking about the holidays and how people are celebrating in a diverse way, as well as home-based businesses that are creating product and selling them on Etsy and online and at festivals. So there's a lot of things, a lot of feature stories in there about people and businesses. So check that out when it comes out at the beginning of December. You can go to livinginpeachtreecorners.com to find out more about the magazine and what's going on in the city, or go to thecapitalistsage.com to find out more podcasts from this series of podcasts and see what other business people and subject expert matters are saying that you might be able to use. And if you're looking for someone to do social media marketing, content, videography, or photography, check out mightyrockets.com. That's my company. And you can always find me on LinkedIn, Rico Figliolini. That's Figliolini. There aren't that many of us on LinkedIn. Check that out and connect with me, and look forward to seeing you all there. But great show, Commissioner Butler. Appreciate you being here with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. And please do visit the Georgia Department of Labor website. If you're a job seeker, explore some of the resources available there. And there's a lot of great data there. If you want to see what's happening in the job market locally, please do reach out and explore some of the great information to share on the website. Thank you, everybody, for joining the Capitalist Sage today. And we'll continue to bring you great guests, having discussion about business and how it impacts your business right here in the community. Thank you very much.
This has been the Capitalist Sage with Karl Barham and Rico Figliolini, the twice-a-month podcast with entrepreneurs and business experts. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Want more? Visit our website at capitalistsagepodcast.com.